They don't need an announcer's call to tell you what you are witnessing is significant. They don't need a slow-motion replay or a graphic displaying exit velocity or a panel of analysts explaining why what just happened matters. They don't need any of the elaborate infrastructure that modern sports broadcasting has constructed around athletic achievement to help audiences process and appreciate what they are seeing. They announce themselves. They arrive with a specific quality of electricity, something felt in the chest before it is understood by the mind, that separates the merely impressive from the genuinely historic. That separates performances you enjoy from performances you remember. That separates players who are very good from players who exist in a category that has no adequate name because the existing vocabulary of sporting excellence was built for lesser things. Shohei Ohtani hit his second home run. And the legends of this game, men who played at the highest level for decades, who have seen everything this sport has to offer, who have long since lost the capacity to be surprised by athletic achievement because they have spent their careers surrounded by it, went completely silent for a moment before finding the only words that felt adequate. The showtime has begun. Not a continuation. Not a return to form. Not a reassuring sign that the early season struggles were temporary and the real Ohtani was still in there somewhere beneath the surface. A beginning. A declaration. The specific announcement that something is awakening that the rest of baseball should be very, very concerned about. 3 consecutive multi-hit games. A second home run of enormous scale. Numbers that would define a lesser player's entire season appearing in a span of days. And the legends watching from the outside, with all their experience and all their hard-won understanding of what this game demands and what it rewards, could only stare at what was unfolding and reach for language that matched the size of it. This is what they saw. This is what it means. And this is why the baseball world just changed. The phrase gets used carelessly. In sports media, top form has been diluted through overuse into something that means little more than playing well recently. It gets applied to players on modest hot streaks, to athletes recovering from minor slumps, to anyone who has strung together a few positive performances in a row and given broadcasters something encouraging to say. When applied to Shohei Ohtani, the phrase requires rehabilitation. Because top form for Ohtani does not mean what it means for other players. The baseline from which his peak performance is measured sits at an altitude that most professional athletes never reach in their entire careers. His average is someone else's extraordinary. His ordinary Tuesday night at the ballpark would represent a career highlight for the vast majority of players who have ever worn a major league uniform. Which means that when Ohtani reaches his actual peak, when all the elements that make him historically unique align simultaneously and he begins operating at the absolute ceiling of his capability, what emerges is something that the sport's statistical frameworks were not designed to accommodate. The 3 consecutive multi-hit games that preceded the second home run told the story in the most unambiguous language baseball possesses. Multi-hit games are not uncommon for good hitters. The best offensive players in the game produce them regularly throughout a season. It is one of the metrics by which consistent hitting excellence is measured and recognized. A single multi-hit game is a good day. 2 in a row is a hot stretch. 3 consecutive multi-hit performances is a statement. It says that whatever was clicking on the first day clicked harder on the second. That whatever adjustments were made, consciously or instinctively, between games were the right adjustments. That the mental and physical alignment required to consistently make hard contact against major league pitching that is itself constantly adjusting, constantly presenting new information, constantly trying to disrupt the patterns that hitters depend on, was not only present but deepening. By the time Ohtani stepped into the batter's box for the at-bat that produced the second home run, he wasn't just hot. He was locked in at the level that only he reaches. The level that the legends recognized immediately. There are home runs that surprise you. They come off swings that look slightly mistimed, off pitches that seem to be winning the at-bat until suddenly they weren't, off contact that produces an outcome that even the hitter himself didn't fully anticipate. These home runs are exciting because of their unexpectedness, the sudden reversal of fortune, the improbability made real. And then there are home runs that feel inevitable. Not in the sense that anyone knew exactly when they were coming, but in the sense that when they arrive, the reaction is not surprise but recognition. The sense that of course this happened. Of course this was where the at-bat was going. Of course this particular pitch, in this particular location, against this particular hitter locked in at this particular level, was always going to produce this particular result. Ohtani's second home run belonged entirely to the second category. The at-bat that produced it was a masterpiece of the confrontation between elite pitcher and elite hitter, the chess match compressed into seconds that those who love baseball find endlessly compelling and those outside the sport find impossible to fully appreciate without having it explained. The pitcher was not throwing poorly. This is important to establish because the magnitude of what Ohtani did only registers fully when you understand the quality of the opposition he was doing it against. The pitches were located with precision. The sequencing was intelligent, the kind of sequencing that reflects genuine preparation, genuine study of Ohtani's tendencies, genuine effort to find the combination that would produce an out or at minimum a non-damaging result. None of it was enough. Ohtani tracked the pitch from the moment it left the pitcher's hand with the kind of visual processing that hitting coaches spend entire careers trying to teach and most hitters spend entire careers trying to learn. His decision-making happened in the fractions of a second that separate the swings that produce home runs from the swings that produce strikeouts, and his decision was correct. The swing was not violent. This is another thing that observers who watch Ohtani closely notice, that his most powerful contact often comes from swings that look, in real time, almost controlled. Almost easy. The violence is there, compressed into the moment of contact and expressed in the result rather than the motion, but what the eye registers is fluidity. Intention. The complete absence of wasted movement. The ball left the bat at a velocity that the radar guns registered and the crowd felt simultaneously. It did not come down for a very long time. They have been watching baseball for a combined century and a half. The men who used the phrase, "the Showtime has begun," former players, Hall of Famers, men whose names are retired in franchise histories and whose statistics still appear in the record books decades after their last professional at-bat, have seen generational talents emerge before. They were present for the arrivals of players who redefined what was possible. They watched, from various vantage points, as the game's understanding of its own boundaries was repeatedly revised upward by athletes who refused to be contained by previous expectations. They are not easily impressed. This is critical context for understanding the weight of their reaction to what Ohtani is doing. When a man who played 15 seasons at the highest level of professional baseball watches a current player and reaches for language that expresses or rather than simple appreciation, the significance of that response cannot be overstated. These are not fans reacting with the emotional generosity that fandom permits. These are professionals applying the most rigorous evaluative frameworks that decades of elite competition have developed, and arriving at conclusions that even they find remarkable. What the legends saw in the 3 consecutive multi-hit games, and what crystallized for them in the second home run, was not simply a hot streak. It was the emergence of a rhythm. The establishment of a pattern that, in their experience, does not typically resolve itself in a single game or even a single week. When a hitter of Ohtani's caliber finds this level of consistency, when the physical mechanics and the mental preparation and the in-game adjustments all align and reinforce each other across multiple consecutive performances, what follows is not a return to average. What follows is a sustained period of dominance that changes the entire calculation for every pitching staff that has to face him. The legends have seen this before. They have been on the field when players entered these states. Some of them experienced it themselves during the peaks of their own careers, that specific period when everything was working and every at-bat felt manageable and the game seemed to slow down to a pace where correct decisions were simply obvious rather than difficult. They recognized what they were seeing in Ohtani. And, "the Showtime has begun," was the most honest description available. What separates Ohtani's current stretch from an ordinary hot streak is visible to anyone who watches with sufficient attention, not just at the results, but at the process that produces them. The preparation that Ohtani brings to each at-bat is not something that emerges spontaneously from natural talent. Natural talent is the foundation, the physical gifts of hand-eye coordination and bat speed and the specific kinesthetic intelligence that allows elite hitters to make adjustments mid-swing that ordinary players cannot make at all, but the structure built on that foundation is deliberate and painstaking and constant. He arrives at the ballpark already thinking about the pitcher he will face. Not in the casual way that most players review scouting reports, glancing at tendencies and locations and preferred sequences and filing the information in a general way, but with the specific, detailed engagement of a player who is constructing a complete internal model of how the upcoming at-bats will unfold. Which pitch in which count? Which location represents the pitcher's preferred escape route when the at-bat reaches a difficult moment? Which sequence has been used successfully against left-handed hitters with similar profiles to his own? Where the gaps exist in what the pitcher likes to do versus what he has actually executed under pressure. By the time Ohtani steps into the batter's box, the at-bat has already been partially played in his mind. This is not unique to him, every elite hitter does some version of this preparation, but the depth and specificity of his version is what separates good preparation from extraordinary preparation. And in the current stretch, that preparation has been producing exactly the results it is designed to produce. He has been taking pitches that most hitters in his position would swing at, borderline pitches that are designed to expand the strike zone and produce weak contact or uncomfortable swings, and letting them pass with the patience of a hitter who knows exactly what he is looking for and is willing to wait for it. He has been doing damage on pitches that pitchers consider their best options against him, the locations and pitch types that scouting reports identify as his weaknesses, suggesting either that those reports have become outdated or that he has made adjustments that have eliminated the weaknesses they describe. Both possibilities are alarming for opposing pitching staffs. The legends saw all of this. They understood exactly what it meant. Individual brilliance is one thing. Baseball history is populated with players who produced singular performances of staggering quality, games that stood alone as monuments to what was possible on a given night when everything aligned. Those performances live in the record books and in the memories of those who witnessed them, and they deserve every ounce of the reverence they receive. But consistency is something different. Something harder. Something that reveals more about a player's fundamental quality than any individual performance can. 3 consecutive multi-hit games requires you to be excellent on the first day and then excellent again the next day against a pitching staff that has now seen what you did yesterday and has spent the intervening hours trying to figure out how to prevent you from doing it again. And then excellent again on the third day against adjustments built on adjustments, against pitchers who are throwing with the accumulated intelligence of everything you have shown them across the previous 2 games. Maintaining offensive production across that kind of compounding opposition is what separates genuinely elite hitters from players who have good days. Ohtani's 3 consecutive multi-hit games were not produced against passive opposition. They were produced against professional pitchers making professional adjustments with professional preparation, men who understand that allowing Ohtani to settle into a rhythm is one of the most dangerous things a pitching staff can permit. They tried to disrupt the rhythm. They failed. And the home run, the massive, undeniable, argument-ending second home run, came after those failed adjustments. After the pitching staff had done everything correctly and Ohtani had answered every correct thing they did with something more correct still. That is what the legends meant. That is what the Showtime has begun actually describes. Not a hot streak. Not a good week. Not an encouraging sign that the player everyone knew was great was still, in fact, great. The beginning of something sustained and serious and genuinely threatening to every team that will face him in the weeks ahead. The baseball world has now been formally notified. Every pitching coach in the National League and American League who has not yet faced the Dodgers is sitting with their staff, reviewing what Ohtani has done across these 3 games, searching for the pattern that will allow them to construct a plan that produces a different result. They will find the pattern. They are professionals with access to the same technology and analytical tools and scouting resources that every modern baseball organization deploys, and their ability to identify tendencies and construct game plans around them is genuine and significant. The question that the legends are watching with the particular attention that comes from having played the game at this level themselves, is not whether opposing pitching staffs will make adjustments. They will. The question is whether those adjustments will be sufficient. Whether the version of Ohtani that is currently operating at his peak will be slowed by the calibrated, intelligent opposition that Major League Baseball always eventually deploys against players who begin producing at historic levels. History suggests caution about easy answers. The players who have entered these states before, the players the legends themselves remember as dominant in this way, were not immune to adjustment. But the best of them had the capacity to answer adjustment with adjustment. To recognize what was being done against them and to find the counter before the opposition found the solution. Ohtani has demonstrated that capacity throughout his career. He is demonstrating it again now, in the most emphatic possible terms, across 3 consecutive multi-hit games and a second home run that left legends reaching for language adequate to describe it. The most alarming thing about what Shohei Ohtani is doing right now is contained in the word the legends chose. Not, Showtime is here. Not, Showtime has returned. Not even, Showtime is at its peak. The Showtime has begun. Begun. As in, this is the opening. As in, what you have seen across these 3 games and this second massive home run is not the destination but the departure point. As in, the players and pitching staffs and coaching personnel who believe that what they have witnessed represents the ceiling of what is coming are making a miscalculation that will cost them dearly. The legends have seen enough baseball to know the difference between a player arriving at his peak and a player just beginning to climb toward it. They are watching the climb. 3 consecutive multi-hit games. A second home run of historic scale. Legends going silent before finding the only words that felt honest and accurate and proportionate to what they were witnessing. The Showtime has begun. The rest of baseball has been warned.